My mother-in-law had a meltdown at my baby shower, insulted me, tried to name my baby, and got arrested for causing a scene. I never expected my own baby shower to turn into a disaster, but that is exactly what happened. My mother-in-law, Barbara, completely lost her mind that day. She insulted me, tried to take over the naming of my child, and ended up getting arrested after making a complete scene. I am 29 years old, married to my amazing husband, Gary, and currently pregnant with our first child. This journey has been one of the most exciting times of our lives. Gary and I have been together for years, married for 4, and we have been trying to start a family for the past year. When we found out I was pregnant 6 months ago, we were overjoyed. We have always stood by each other through life's ups and downs, and this news only made our bond stronger. Every day that passes brings us closer to finally meeting our baby, and we cannot wait. Pregnancy has been a whirlwind of emotions, excitement, nerves, and those little moments of wonder, like feeling the baby kick for the first time. Gary has been my biggest source of support through it all. He has come to every doctor's appointment, we have read parenting books together, and he is even putting together a beautiful nursery for our little one. We have been fully focused on preparing for this next chapter, talking about baby names, planning for the future, and dreaming about what life will be like once our child arrives. Watching how thrilled Gary is about becoming a father makes me love him even more. We are in this together, taking on every challenge, and soaking in the joy of getting ready to meet our baby. 2 months ago, we decided it was finally time to share our big news with the family. We wanted to make sure we got through the first trimester safely before telling everyone. So, we invited our parents, close relatives, and a few friends over for lunch, ready to celebrate. When they arrived, they were expecting just a regular family gathering, but the moment they noticed my growing belly, their faces lit up with happiness. My mother burst into tears, overwhelmed with joy, and immediately embraced me. She completely understood why we had waited to share the news and was simply thrilled to become a grandmother. But Barbara? Her reaction could not have been more different. Instead of celebrating with us, she became angry. She was furious that we had kept the pregnancy from her, acting as though it was a personal betrayal. She accused me of purposely leaving her out, despite my attempts to explain why we had chosen to wait. Nothing I said mattered, she was determined to be offended. Her attitude cast a shadow over what should have been a happy occasion. That entire evening, Barbara refused to speak to me. She ignored me completely and was even rude to my mother, who had always been kind to her. While the rest of the family enjoyed the gathering, she sat with her face buried in her phone, sulking. It was obvious to everyone that she was upset. She kept complaining to anyone who would listen about how unfair it was that she had been left in the dark about the pregnancy, acting like she had already lost time with a grandchild who was not even born yet. Gary and his brother picked up on her frustration, but as the tension kept growing, I reached my limit. I quietly stepped outside to take a moment for myself, feeling overwhelmed. My mother, sensing my distress, followed me and reassured me until I felt ready to go back inside. As the evening came to an end, Barbara made a point to say goodbye to me last, barely managing to acknowledge me at all. She had spent the entire day avoiding me, and it was obvious that she wanted to make sure I knew she was still upset. Later, when Gary walked his parents to their car, I overheard them arguing. Barbara wasted no time turning the situation into yet another chance to complain about me. Thankfully, by then, all of our guests had already left, so it was just me, my parents, Gary, and his parents. She angrily told him that she could not believe I had the audacity to keep such an important secret from her and that my actions proved I did not care about family. Gary remained calm, explaining that he and I had made the decision together to wait before sharing the news. He reminded her that we wanted to be cautious and make sure everything was okay before announcing the pregnancy. That was not what she wanted to hear. She exploded. "This is my grandchild we are talking about," she screamed. "I deserved to know from the start." Gary, still trying to stay level-headed, responded, "Mom, this is not about who deserves what. It was our decision, and we made it together. She just wanted to be careful." Cautious, she scoffed. "I am her mother-in-law. She should have trusted me. This is her fault." That was the last straw for Gary. Up until then, he had been patient, but hearing his mother put all the blame on me pushed him over the edge. His face turned red with anger as he shot back, "If you are going to blame her, then you should blame me too." I agreed to wait to tell everyone, and I stand by that decision. "You need to get over this and stop acting like a victim." Barbara refused to back down. "She is controlling you. You do not even see it. As your mother, I should have been the first to know that you were having a baby." Gary stood firm. "Mom, I love you, but you need to stop attacking my wife. You are making this into something bigger than it needs to be. I think you need to leave before you say something you will regret." Fuming, Barbara turned and stormed off, leaving Gary standing there, exhausted and frustrated. Meanwhile, I had been so overwhelmed by the entire situation that I had not even realized I was crying. The things she said had cut deep. Gary immediately came to comfort me, gently leading me back inside. My parents, sensing the tension, stayed behind for a little longer to make sure I was okay before heading home. But Barbara was not done. Later that night, I got a message from her, and my stomach dropped the moment I saw her name on my phone. I opened it, dreading what she had to say. Her message read, "I must say, I am deeply disappointed in you. You deliberately kept this from me, and I find it absolutely unforgivable. I cannot believe you would rob me of the joy of knowing about my grandchild from the very beginning. This is not how family works, and it is incredibly disrespectful. Instead of apologizing for your immature decision, you are now creating distance between me and my son. Shame on you." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Anger, hurt, frustration, it all swirled together. I immediately showed the message to Gary, and he was livid. He could not believe that his mother was still acting this way, refusing to take any responsibility and placing all the blame on me. Without hesitation, he called her. His voice was firm as he warned her not to send any more messages like that, saying that if she continued with this behavior, he would have no choice but to cut her off. He made it clear that her negativity was not welcome in our lives, especially while I was pregnant. It was the first time I had ever heard Gary talk to his mother like that, and it must have scared her, because suddenly, her attitude changed. Instead of doubling down, she shifted tactics. She insisted that the only way she could forgive us for what she saw as a betrayal was if we allowed her to throw us a baby shower. The sudden change caught us both off guard. She pleaded, saying that nothing would make her happier than planning a grand event for me and her grandchild. She promised that she would take care of everything. Gary glanced at me, unsure. I did not trust her motives for a second. It felt like she was trying to regain control after losing the upper hand. I hesitated, but Gary, always the peacekeeper, said maybe this could be a way to mend things before the baby arrived. Reluctantly, I agreed. We told Barbara she could go ahead and plan the shower. She was ecstatic, gushing about how grateful she was that we were giving her the chance. But deep down, I had a sinking feeling that this was not going to go well. And unfortunately, I was right. Gary glanced at me, waiting for a reaction, but I could already tell something was off. Barbara's sudden enthusiasm felt more like a ploy to regain control than a genuine attempt to make amends. It was hard to believe she had gone from raging at me to suddenly wanting to throw a party in my honor. Still, Gary, always the peacemaker, wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. He reasoned that letting her plan the baby shower might smooth things over and help us avoid further drama before the baby arrived. I had my doubts, but I also did not want to argue. Hesitantly, I agreed. Gary told his mother she could go ahead with the planning, and she immediately acted as if she had won some great victory. She was ecstatic, gushing about how much it meant to her, but I quickly realized that in her mind, this was not my baby shower, it was hers. I had assumed she would at least ask for my input, considering it was my pregnancy being celebrated, but within a few days, it became clear that was not going to happen. Barbara took over everything. She picked the decorations, chose the games, planned the food, and even dictated the guest list without consulting anyone, not even me. My own mother reached out to her to discuss the arrangements, thinking they would plan it together, but Barbara shut her down, saying everything was already decided and that it was meant to be a surprise for me. I was furious. This was supposed to be a day about celebrating my baby, and she had completely hijacked it. But at that point, I figured there was no stopping her. I just had to brace myself for whatever disaster was coming. The day of the baby shower arrived, and I walked into the venue with a mix of nerves and frustration. It was a banquet hall, packed with friends and family who were genuinely excited to celebrate. That should have been enough to make me happy, but the moment I stepped inside, I realized just how badly Barbara had taken things into her own hands. The decorations were awful. A flood of brown and beige balloons covered every inch of the room, creating a theme that looked like a failed attempt at a safari. It was dark, dull, and completely opposite of the soft pastels and warm, welcoming colors I had imagined. It looked nothing like a baby shower. As I scanned the room, my eyes locked onto something even worse. Right at the entrance was a massive banner featuring a collage of my husband's baby pictures. And not just a few, but dozens of them, all arranged in an elaborate tribute to Barbara's favorite person in the world, her son. I stared in disbelief. This was supposed to be a celebration of my baby, but somehow, she had turned it into an event about Gary's childhood. Barbara, standing nearby, caught my eye and grinned. "Isn't it wonderful?" she beamed. "I thought it would be special because, after all, your baby is going to look just like Gary." I opened my mouth to respond but quickly closed it. What was I even supposed to say to that? I glanced around and noticed some of my friends giving me sympathetic looks. I was not the only one who thought this was completely inappropriate. The tension in the room grew heavier as more guests arrived, their expressions shifting from excitement to confusion. People whispered to each other, obviously taken aback by the odd setup. Then, my mother arrived. She stepped inside, took one long look at the disaster in front of her, and froze. I watched as her eyes landed on the banner, widening with disbelief. Her face shifted from shock to something else, something much more determined. Without a word, she marched straight to the banner, grabbed hold of it, and yanked it down. The entire room went silent. Everyone turned to watch as she rolled up the enormous tribute to my husband's infancy and carried it straight to the trash. Barbara, who had been happily chatting with guests, turned just in time to see my mother toss the banner into the bin. "What do you think you are doing?" she shrieked. That was a special touch to celebrate the baby and the family. My mother, calm but firm, met her gaze. "This celebration is about my daughter and her baby. Not about your son. Not about you." A few of the guests shifted awkwardly, unsure of whether to get involved, while others nodded in silent agreement. Barbara was clearly trying to regain control of the situation. She forced a smile and let out a nervous laugh. "Well, I just thought it would be nice for everyone to see where the baby is coming from. I mean, I did throw this wonderful event for them." My mother, unwavering, shot back, "You begged my daughter to let you host this shower after the way you treated her. And now, you have turned it into something completely about yourself." Barbara's forced smile faltered. It was obvious she had not expected to be challenged so openly. She had spent the entire evening parading around like she was the guest of honor, but now, people were starting to realize what was really happening. She had overplayed her hand. With no other option, Barbara let out a stiff laugh, muttered something about just wanting to do something nice, and awkwardly returned to mingling with the guests. I tried to focus on the positive, reminding myself that at least my friends and family were here to celebrate me and my baby. Despite the tension, I did my best to enjoy the shower. But of course, Barbara was not done. As the party went on, I noticed her drinking more than seemed appropriate for a baby shower. At first, I ignored it. What was I supposed to do? Tell her to stop? That would only create more drama. Then, it was time to open gifts. I was genuinely touched by the thoughtful presents from my friends and family, but when Barbara handed me a huge gift box, I could feel every set of eyes in the room on us. She had an exaggerated grin on her face, like she had planned something big. I hesitated before opening the box, my stomach twisting in anticipation. As I lifted the lid, I immediately understood why everyone was staring. The room went completely silent. I glanced at my mother, who was now glaring at Barbara, and then at the guests, who were exchanging awkward glances, clearly just as stunned as I was. I did not know what to say, but one thing was for certain: Barbara was far from finished. I forced a small smile, trying to keep things civil, and thanked Barbara for the gift, even though my gut told me there was something off about it. I fought the urge to roll my eyes, hoping to get through the rest of the event without any more unnecessary drama. Then came the cake-cutting ceremony, and I could tell something was brewing. Barbara had gone out of her way to order a massive, over-the-top tiered cake, covered in decorations that made it look more like a wedding cake than something for a baby shower. She clinked her glass to get everyone's attention, standing tall like she was about to make some grand announcement. I felt my stomach tighten. I had no idea what was coming, but I knew I was not going to like it. Everyone turned to look at her, waiting for her to speak. And then, with a proud smile, she dropped the bombshell. She had already picked out the perfect name for my baby girl. The room went silent. I froze, trying to process what I had just heard. My husband and I had not even finalized a name yet, and here she was, acting like she had the final say. She beamed with pride as she announced that our baby would be named after her great-grandmother, a name that sounded like it belonged in a historical novel rather than on a birth certificate. The entitlement was unreal. Taking a deep breath, I calmly but firmly stated that my husband and I wanted to choose our daughter's name ourselves. It was an important decision, one that only we, as the parents, had the right to make. But Barbara was not having it. She scoffed at my response, waving her hand dismissively. She argued that since she had spent so much money on the baby shower, it was only fair that she got to name the baby. I could not believe what I was hearing. I made it clear once again that, no matter who planned the shower, naming the baby was not up for debate. That is when she lost it. In front of everyone, Barbara started yelling at me, accusing me of being ungrateful and disrespectful. She went on a rant about how she had done so much for this family, and I was repaying her kindness by shutting her out. Then, she took things even further. She jabbed her finger in my face, shouting that she was the real mother of this baby, because, according to her, she was the one who had given birth to my husband. She even had the audacity to say that since it was his sperm that created the child, she had a claim to the baby. I was absolutely disgusted. My mother stepped in, positioning herself between me and Barbara, trying to shut down her cruel words. But that only made Barbara angrier. She turned her insults toward my mom, saying she had raised me poorly and that I had no respect for family. At that point, the whole room was tense. Guests exchanged nervous glances, some clearly uncomfortable with what was unfolding. I could hear the murmurs, the quiet gasps, the shifting in seats. Barbara was spiraling, and it was clear that she had been drinking more than she should have. Trying to talk reason into her was pointless. I decided I had endured enough. I was not going to let her ruin what was supposed to be a happy occasion any further. So, with as much dignity as I could muster, I picked up the gifts my friends had brought for me and prepared to leave. If Barbara wanted to act like this, she could do it without me there. But just as I was walking out, she yanked the gifts right out of my hands and threw them onto the ground. "You are nothing but an ungrateful little witch," she shrieked. "You are tearing my son away from me." Gasps echoed through the room. Some of the guests instinctively stepped back, realizing that this situation was getting completely out of control. That was when I noticed some people pulling out their phones, recording the whole incident. Barbara was too far gone to care. She continued hurling insults at me, her voice growing louder, her words more vicious. Enough was enough. I turned to one of my close friends and quietly asked her to start ushering guests out. The event was officially over. But Barbara was still shouting, making it clear she was not going to stop anytime soon. And that was when I made the call. Yes, you heard that right. I had to call the police at my own baby shower. I never thought things would come to this, but I was starting to feel genuinely unsafe. Barbara was out of control, and there was no reasoning with her in this state. When the officers arrived, she immediately switched gears, putting on the performance of a lifetime. She pointed at me, painting me as the villain, claiming that I had set her up and was turning her own son against her. The officers listened but remained professional. They could tell she had been drinking, and they tried to calm her down. But instead of taking the opportunity to collect herself, Barbara doubled down, yelling at the police, waving her arms around, and refusing to cooperate. Big mistake. Things escalated fast. She ignored their warnings, continued yelling, and before she knew it, she was being placed in handcuffs. I stood there in stunned silence, watching as my mother-in-law was escorted out of my baby shower in front of a room full of guests. It was surreal. After she was gone, I left with my mother and a few close friends, still shaken from the whole experience. In the days that followed, the fallout was worse than I expected. Barbara played the victim, reaching out to family members who were not even at the shower, twisting the story to make it seem like I had humiliated her for no reason. Some of them took her side, not knowing the full story. But those who had actually been there knew the truth. Gary, though upset by what had happened, admitted that he felt I might have overreacted by calling the police. He believed I could have handled things differently, maybe called him or his father instead. I understood his perspective, but at the same time, I knew I had done what I needed to do. I was not going to sit around and let myself be treated that way, especially not when I was pregnant. So now, I turn to you, Reddit. Was I wrong for calling the cops on my own mother-in-law for destroying my baby shower and trying to act like she was the mother of my baby? Update 1. I was not expecting the overwhelming response to my story, but I truly appreciate everyone who reached out and shared their thoughts. To those who supported my decision to call the cops, thank you. This was one of the most stressful situations I have ever dealt with, and hearing that others believe I made the right choice means a lot. Looking back, I now realize just how out of hand things had gotten. I had never seen my mother-in-law act this aggressively before, and it left me genuinely worried about what she might do in the future. My biggest concern was not just her words but the way she completely lost control. Being pregnant, I did not want to take any risks. Since the baby shower, every single guest who attended has reached out to check on me. Some have even sent me videos they recorded of the entire event. I now have proof of everything that went down, and I plan to show it to my husband this weekend. I need him to see for himself what really happened. Update 2. Gary and I finally sat down for a serious talk. I walked him through everything, explaining in full detail how his mother's behavior had escalated throughout the night, from her early passive-aggressive remarks to the complete meltdown that ended with her getting arrested. Then, I showed him the recordings. I watched his face as he took it all in. At first, he was quiet, but as the videos went on, his expression changed. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched, and I could see the anger and disbelief building in him. By the time the last video ended, he shook his head. I had no idea it got this bad, he admitted. I am so sorry you had to go through all of that. Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. Gary finally saw the truth. Watching the videos seemed to shake Gary to his core. As he sat there, replaying the chaotic moments from my baby shower, I could see the reality sinking in. He had always known his mother could be difficult, but this? This was something else entirely. His face grew tense, his eyes dark with frustration, and by the time the last clip ended, he let out a heavy sigh. He turned to me, his voice low but full of regret. I had no idea it got this bad. I am so sorry you had to go through all that. Hearing him finally acknowledge the severity of the situation brought me some relief. For the first time, he truly understood what I had been dealing with. He admitted that he had never imagined his mother could act this way, that it was completely out of character for her, or at least, that was what he had thought. But the videos did not lie. He reassured me that from now on, my safety and well-being, especially during my pregnancy, were his priority. No more excuses, no more justifications for her behavior. We sat there for a long time, unpacking everything that had happened. Barbara's need for control, her desperate attempt to make the baby shower about herself, and, worst of all, her complete lack of respect for me as the mother of her grandchild. As we talked, it became painfully clear this was not just about the baby shower. This was about years of unchecked behavior that had finally boiled over. Gary, grappling with the truth about his mother, admitted his own concerns. He acknowledged that she had gone too far, that her actions were not just embarrassing but harmful. That was when I told him my decision. I am done, I said firmly. After what she did, I do not want her in my life. And I do not want her around our child. Gary looked at me, conflicted, but he did not argue. Instead, he nodded slowly. If you still want to have a relationship with her, that is your choice, I continued. But she is not going to be part of my life, and she is definitely not going to be around our baby. Not unless she gets serious help and actually changes. At that moment, Gary did something I did not expect. I do not want a relationship with her either, he said. Not after this. I blinked, surprised. I had expected him to push back, to try and convince me to find some middle ground. But instead, he had come to his own conclusion. My mom completely disrespected you, he said, his voice steady. She ruined what was supposed to be a special day for you. She humiliated you in front of everyone. That is not something I can just ignore. If she cannot respect my wife, then she does not deserve to be in our lives. I told him that I was not asking him to cut her off entirely, that he could still talk to her if he wanted to, but he shook his head. No. She crossed a line, and I am done making excuses for her. Hearing those words from him made me feel more supported than I ever had before. Gary promised me that he would be the one to communicate our decision to his mother. He wanted to be crystal clear, this was not just my decision. It was his too. And I made sure to tell him one last thing. If she ever shows up at our home, trying to force her way back into our lives, I will call the cops again. No hesitation. Gary did not argue. He simply nodded, fully understanding that his mother had made her own bed. 1 month later. For those of you who have been asking, yes, the baby and I are doing fine. I am just weeks away from meeting my little one, and I could not be more excited. And as for Barbara? We have not spoken to her since. Gary had a final conversation with his parents, laying everything out. His father, to his credit, respected our decision. He assured Gary that he would try to get Barbara to understand the boundaries we set, though I doubt she ever truly will. But let me tell you, the difference in our lives has been incredible. Without Barbara's constant drama, our home is peaceful. There are no more stress-inducing phone calls, no passive-aggressive messages, no walking on eggshells. Just Gary and me, preparing for the arrival of our baby, finally able to focus on what really matters. The support we have received from friends and family has been overwhelming. My parents and closest friends have been a rock for me through all of this, reminding me that I am not crazy for setting boundaries. Even some of Gary's extended family, who initially did not know the full story, have reached out after seeing the viral videos from the baby shower. Now that they have witnessed Barbara's behavior for themselves, many of them have expressed their support, telling us we made the right decision. Of course, this is not the end of the road. There will always be lingering challenges, and I am sure Barbara will try to find a way to get back into our lives. But for now, we are at peace. And as we count down the days until we finally meet our baby, we are more determined than ever to create a home that is filled with love, support, and respect, the kind of home that puts our family first. No toxicity. No manipulation. No Barbara.